Our next speaker at Haslam, me and Lee, New Avenues in Lee Harvey Oswald Research. Ed Haslam lived in New Orleans in the 1960s. He was the son of a physician. He began his journey into JFK research by investigating the bizarre 1964 murder of one of his father's colleagues, Dr. Mary Sherman. In his 1995 book, Mary, Fairy, and the Monkey Virus, investigated rumors of a biological weapon being developed in New Orleans by people whose names had been associated with Lee Harvey Oswald in one way or another. In 2000, CBS 60 Minutes contacted Haslam and introduced him to Judith Very Baker, who admitted to being part of the medical project that Haslam had written about. When she produced documents proving that she had been trained in cancer research and that she had worked with Lee Oswald at the Riley Coffee Company, Haslam became more interested in her story. As a result, he included 2 chapters on Judith in his book in 2007, Dr. Mary's Monkey. After his publisher secured the rights to Judith's manuscript, Haslam was asked to edit the book, Me and Lee, How I Came to Know and Love and Lose Lee Harvey Oswald, which was released in hardcover earlier this year. At COPA 2010, Haslam will share his thoughts on how Judith's narrative has affected our understanding of Lee Harvey Oswald and how it opens up new avenues for further research into his activities. So whenever you're ready.
Hi there. I'm working on the tech stuff here. I'll be with you in a second.
7. Okay, good. First of all, good morning. Thank you all for coming. This is the heart beat of the JFK assassination community, in my opinion, and I appreciate you all being here. I am Ed Haslam. I wrote a book called Dr. Mary's Monkey. I hope you're familiar with it. Today I'm going to be talking about another book called Me and Lee, which I had the pleasure of editing, and I wrote the foreword for. It wasn't a task I sought. It was one that came to me, and I'm glad I did it, and I hope I don't have to do it again. Let me just put it that way. This is the story of Judith Very Baker. Here is Judy. She was a beautiful young woman, and I emphasize this because if you start this from the point of view of who was this 65-year-old woman that something strange happened to a long time ago, it's difficult to get back there. When you start with understanding that we're dealing with a beautiful young woman, it makes a lot more sense. She starts out as a young girl in Bradenton, Florida. She started to do her own cancer experiments while she was in high school. She was hoping to find a cure for cancer because she had watched her grandmother die of cancer. And in 1961, she figured out how to give cancer to mice in 7 days. This was faster than they were doing it at the National Cancer Institute. Now we're talking about a high school student with no budget in a dirt floor laboratory outperforming NCI. And so when this comes to the attention of Dr. Alton Ochsner, recently president of the American Cancer Society, he says, hey, I got an asset. I'm going to start developing this one. He starts financing her education and giving her money through various organizations, including the American Cancer Society, the National Science Foundation, and some other places. And with the help of some really powerful politicians like Florida Senator Smathers, who, as you know, had a unique relationship with both JFK and LBJ. This is an abstract showing Judith's cancer research in 1961. It was published in 62. You see her name, Judith Very, that's her maiden name. She was working on melanoma and in a human host. Okay, she's working with human cancers and she has access to radiation at this time. Then the Russian missiles come into Cuba, and it kind of changes the political environment, which is already pretty highly strung due to the Cold War. That little blue star is New Orleans, where Ochsner lives. So in April 1963, Ochsner invites Judy for a special project to work with Dr. Mary Sherman in New Orleans, who runs his cancer lab at Ochsner Clinic. She's a big shot out of the University of Chicago. And in New Orleans, Judy meets this guy, apparently accidentally, but if you believe that, I have some swampland in Florida I'd like to sell you. He immediately, within 24 hours, introduces her to his friend, Dr. David Ferry, who tells Judy they want to kill Fidel Castro in order to prevent World War III. And Lee helps Judy find an apartment. This is the apartment. Here's the neighborhood. That's Judy's apartment. That's Lee's apartment. Here's the bus that goes to Riley Coffee Company. There's Mary Sherman's apartment. There's David Ferry's apartment. There's the bus that connects those two. There's the linear particle accelerator I wrote about in Dr. Mary's Monkey. And there's Dr. Alton Ochsner's house. This is the neighborhood. This is where Lee gets Judy a job. Does this look like a conservative coffee company to you? The guy on the right is William Boatner Riley, the founder of the W.B. Riley Coffee Company. And here is Judith's W-2 form proving she worked at the Riley Coffee Company. And Lee and Judy become friends, and to find out what else happens in the book, you're going to have to read the book, okay? What I'm going to talk about today, last time I was at COPA, I talked about what was inside the book, and I did a lot of detail on that. So I want you to send $50 to John Judge, and he'll send you a video, and you can see what I talked about last time. This time, what I'm doing is talking about the stuff around the book, okay? And things that strike me as interesting. Did anyone see Judy and Lee together in New Orleans? Well, yes, they did. There is a witness. Her name is Anna Lewis. She was a waitress at a restaurant right there by Bannister's office. She was married to David Lewis, who worked for Guy Bannister, which is how he knew Lee Oswald, okay? And they double dated together. And one of those nights, they went to the 500 Club, where Lee introduces her to Carlos Marcello. Lee knows Carlos Marcello, okay? This is mafia. It's not to say that it's not also some other things. You may watch all 34 minutes of Anna Lewis's interview for free on my website, which is drmarysmonkey.com. You just spell out the word doctor, okay? We are grateful for this videotape because it was recorded in the year 2000 by Deborah Conway. This photo shows Judith Very Baker, Deborah Conway, and Anna Lewis in the same photo. This has not been retouched, okay? And as you know, Deborah is the head of Lancer. And while I'm on the subject of witnesses, in Jackson, Louisiana, the barber, Edwin McGee, sees Judith sitting in the front seat of the car that Lee Harvey Oswald's driving. Okay, he doesn't know who she's Judy, but he knows there's a woman in the front seat, and the FBI knows it's not Marina because Marina's in New Orleans that day. And Reese Morgan, who's the state representative, his daughter, when Lee's in there talking to her father, she goes out on the porch and she sees a woman sitting in the front seat. Garrison wanted to find this woman. The closing arguments of the Garrison trial says, we wish we knew who she was. Okay, if Garrison had been able to figure out who Judith was, one of two things would have happened. Either Judith would be dead or Garrison's trial would have turned out differently. Okay, did anyone see Lee at Mary Sherman's apartment, as Judith claims? Yes. Here I'd like to introduce Joan Mellon, who wrote a book called A Farewell to Justice. And this is what I call the flushing the toilet incident. And it is from Joan Mellon's Farewell to Justice book, page 50. And there she looks at Mary Sherman's neighbors, okay, one of whose name is Juan Valdez. She puts it in quotes because there's about 6 different ways to spell Valdez. But he works at the ITM with Clay Shaw, maybe even for Clay Shaw. But he lives next door to Mary Sherman. When Mary Sherman gets murdered and they set the body on fire, it is Juan Valdez that smells the smoke and calls the police department, not the fire department. In the apartment, there's a woman by the name of Victoria Hayes, or Hawes. Okay? One day, knock, knock, knock on the door. She goes and opens the door, and there is Lee Harvey Oswald. How does she know this? Because she went to middle school with Lee Harvey Oswald. She says, "Hi, Lee. What you doing?" He says, "Is this Juan's apartment?" She said, "No, Juan lives upstairs." Okay? So Hawes knows Lee, knows he's looking for Juan, and Valdez goes over to her house, Juan Valdez, and says, "You know, I need to make some long-distance phone calls. I really don't want to do it from my phone. Can I do it from your phone?" And he's calling Cuba and Miami. I mean, I'm not sure if this woman's the sharpest tool in the box. I wouldn't let somebody call outside the country on my phone. I mean, I wouldn't. Okay. Lee and Juan both know Mary Sherman. This woman verifies this because she sees them both coming and going in and out of her apartment. Okay? Now, and Lee, she knows that Lee's in Juan's apartment often. What are they doing? One of these times, they go in there, and every time, you know, this is a very acoustically transparent building. They can hear Mary Sherman walking around upstairs and stuff. Every time Juan Valdez flushes the toilet, Victoria Hawes can hear it. Lee and Juan are in there, and they flush the toilet 20 times in a row. What are they doing? Well, they're getting rid of something. What are they getting rid of? Well, Judith tells us that they're bringing the tumors from David Ferry's apartment over to Mary Sherman's apartment. They're flushing tumors down the toilet to get rid of them. Thank you, Joan Mellon. Oh, here's a picture of Joan with Jim Garrison in the 1960s to prove that she was really there. Now, does Me and Lee, which is a wonderful book if you haven't read it, and show of hands, how many people have already read this book? Okay, good, thank you. She says some stuff about Lee's movements that answers a lot of questions that have never been able to be answered before. Okay, here's the Warren Commission's version of the Mexico City trip, right? It starts out in New Orleans and goes to Mexico City. The problem, you see that little red line there? Nobody sees Lee on the bus between New Orleans and Houston. But plenty of people see him between Houston and Laredo and Mexico City. But that same day, a witness sees Lee in Austin, in fact, two of them, two witnesses, and the Sylvia Odio thing happens in Dallas that night, okay? So what when Lee gets back from Mexico City, he calls Judy and tells her what happened. He went to Houma, Louisiana that morning, got on this airplane, or an airplane similar to this, it's called a Dove, made by de Havilland, and they flew him to Austin, where he went to the an office inside the governor's office complex and picked up an envelope of cash and did some other stuff and went back to the airport and flew to Dallas, and then they flew him to Houston, where they wrestled with him over control of the biological weapon, and they won, in my opinion. And then he goes to Mexico City. The point here is that this airplane flies at 200 miles an hour and has a 1,000-mile range on it. It belongs, according to Lee, to Schlumberger Tool Company. Okay? And the pilot is Hugh Ward. Okay? Now, when you realize that they are flying Lee Harvey Oswald around in sophisticated oil field logistics airplanes, then all of a sudden some other things start to come into place. Let's talk about Atomic Lee. On July 26th, Lee signs the guest book at the Atomic Energy Museum in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. But on July 27th, the following morning, he gets in a car with his uncle Dutz and Marina and drives to the Jesuit Seminary in Mobile, and that's the following morning. Okay, here's the problem. Oak Ridge, Tennessee is 600 miles from New Orleans. Today, the interstate is completed, and by completed interstate, it's 9.5 hours. Okay, in 1963, it was more like 15 or 18 hours. You cannot do this by car. And therefore, people say, well, maybe that's not Lee Harvey Oswald, or maybe he had an airplane. Okay, July 26th, July 27th, Judith says, July 25th, Lee is with her and David Ferry in David Ferry's apartment with a Cuban man, and they're working on a training film that Lee's been shooting out in the woods on the other side of the lake. But Lee excuses himself, and he and the Cuban man leave to go to an airport, is what Lee tells Judy. Okay, so they get to the airport, they fly up to Oak Ridge, and in this airplane, if you want to do some research, why don't you check the FAA records? That would be really, and don't just do the main airports, also go out to places like Houma and stuff, and in Tennessee, you want to get Knoxville as well as Oak Ridge, okay, because they're all in the same area there. So why is Lee in Oak Ridge? Well, they do radioactive research up there, and he needs some radioactive materials for the radioactive project in New Orleans that Judy is working on with Dr. Oshner and Dr. Sherman. Here is his signature. Lee H. Oswald from the USSR, in case you missed it. I mean, he actually writes that on the thing, all right? I'm here from the Russian people, okay? He lives in New Orleans. He signs at Dallas Road, Dallas, Texas. Maybe he's trying to tell somebody something. This is a comparison of his signature from several weeks before on the Riley time card with that on the Atomic Energy Commission thing, so it looks pretty good to me. That week, end of July, the 19th, he loses his job. The 31st, they raid the training camp across the lake. That week in between, when he goes to Oak Ridge and back and to Mobile and back, there's all these FBI reports and customs reports about all these Cubans in New Orleans that are normally in Miami, and that is when they raid McClaney's training camp. Okay? That's a big week. That's also the week that Lee tells Judith that they're going to assassinate Kennedy, and they're going to blame it on him. That's July 29th, a Monday. Okay, does me and Lee tell us anything about Daley Plaza, since that's a high interest to everybody in the room? Let's talk about smuggling rifles. Lee helped David Ferry and Clay Shaw smuggle rifles into New Orleans from South America to arm anti-Castro Cubans. Judith says that Jack Ruby and Carlos Martello were also involved in that. She knows this because this project was discussed one night at the 500 Club when she, Anna Lewis, David Lewis, Lee, Clay Shaw, and Carlos Martello were all, and some other people were all in the room. And why would you smuggle rifles into the United States? Like, we don't need any more, right? And Latin America doesn't even make them. And but if you're planning to do something illegal, you don't want the rifles traced back to the source. So you don't want to see made in Connecticut on them. Okay. Judith decides to help the project, and she designs this method of smuggling the rifles in a furniture crate. And Lee told her that the rifles would arrive on one of the sister ships coming in from Venezuela. Okay, sister ships, Venezuela, New Orleans, 1963, Delta Steamship Lines. Delta Steamship owned 3 sister ships. They were identical ships, and they circulated constantly between 3 cities. Those cities were New Orleans, Caracas, Venezuela, and Buenos Aires, Argentina. Okay? There's the map showing you the 3 cities. At one time, I mean, they had one boat in each port at all times, and then they'd move like that. Okay, how does this connect to Dallas? Well, the rifle in the Texas School Book Depository was a 7.65 Mauser. We know that because Roger Craig said that, and we know that because Boone said that, and we know that because Weitzman said that, and this is the paper trail before someone swapped rifles to the 6.5 Mannlicher Carcano. Even Walter Cronkite and the media said it was a Mauser. They said it was a German Mauser from World War II. You remember that one? Well, the problem is the German Mauser from World War II is a 7.92 millimeter Mauser, commonly called the 8 millimeter Mauser, and lots of third-party ammo available for that one. The 7.65 millimeter Mauser was built under contract for the Argentine military. It's called the Argentine Mauser, and it had unique ammo. So you had soldiers with rifles with presidents with the ammo. Okay, so third parties could not supply their soldiers with ammos to overthrow the president. The president controlled the ammo. That's the importance of this rifle. So the question, and here's a nice picture of it. It's beautiful. Look at that nice long barrel. You could hit a target at 1,000 yards with that guy. Beautiful piece of machinery. Was the rifle in the Texas School Book Depository from Argentina? If so, how did it get there? Okay? Well, if it starts out in Argentina, it goes to Venezuela and then to New Orleans, and it comes in on one of the sister ships from Venezuela. So any rifle smuggled from Argentina arrived from Venezuela, and that is an area that nobody has researched. I don't even think that I've researched it. I just noticed these things, and I present it to you as an area that somebody might want to take a really good look at. And so what is the single most important thing for me and Lee that contributes to the study of the assassination itself? I think it's Lee Harvey Oswald's time cards. And the reason is, if you think about all the stuff that's in those 24 volumes, I mean, you know, study Jack Ruby's mother's teeth and all that stuff. I mean, all this extraneous stuff, right? They're talking about the work record of the guy accused of killing the president, where they got all this testimony from his supervisor saying, he's never there. He's never there. I got so mad after 10 weeks, I fired the guy. Well, why are you approving his time cards if he's not there? I mean, are you asleep at the switch? Who's running this show? Now, the problem is, if you look down the lower right-hand corner and you see that little initial there, that's who's approving the time cards. That J on Lee's time cards is the J from Judith Very Baker. This is her student ID card from the University of Florida. This is from a poem she wrote in 1963 that we have the original of. When you look at those three, it's a pretty nice match. This is what was in the Warren Commission. It's a list. They don't want to show the real time card. Somebody might say, whose initial is that? They show a list. Who prepared the list? Judith's boss, Mr. Moynihan, ex-FBI agent, okay? Vice President of Riley Coffee Company, and co-founder of Inca with Ochsner, okay? I mean, talk about round up the usual suspects, but this gets worse. I promise you, there's more, okay? After the assassination, Moynihan leaves the Riley Coffee Company and becomes executive director of the Metropolitan Crime Commission. If that sounds official to you, welcome to New Orleans. It is faux government. This is a private organization, as I'll explain later, but Dr. Ochsner and Eustace Riley are on the board of directors. So when Moynihan gets run out of the Riley Coffee Company, he's got a job waiting for him over at the Metropolitan Crime Commission. It is the Metropolitan Crime Commission that leads the attack on Jim Garrison. While he is investigating the Kennedy assassination, but before the public knows he's investigating it, because the leak has not happened yet, there's a letter that gets sent to the Louisiana State Attorney General saying, you need to fire this man. We say so, the Metropolitan Crime Commission in New Orleans. That letter is signed by William Moynihan, and he did it at the direction of Ochsner and Riley. Okay? He's called before the grand jury. You can read his grand jury testimony in New Orleans. It's on the internet. Okay, now here's what I find the interesting part. Lee Harvey Oswald's records were taken from the Riley Coffee Company by an FBI agent by the name of Warren DeBreeze. Okay? Warren DeBreeze writes a 36-page report. The time cards are in there. He turns them over to the FBI. The FBI turns it over to the Warren Commission. The Warren Commission has Lee Harvey Oswald's time cards, but they don't publish them. Okay? Warren DeBreeze, interesting guy, winds up working for the Metropolitan Crime Commission as the executive director, later board member, and I think later chairman of the board, as Moynihan was, okay? Nice rewards for guys that help out. But between the FBI, between this report and the Metropolitan Crime Commission, DeBreeze gets assigned to run the FBI office in the Dominican Republic. Next door, in the Dominican Republic, is the CIA office. The man running the CIA office is David Atlee Phillips. He said, oh yeah, I work with Dave Phillips all the time. Great guy, you know? So I'll stop there and take any questions you have on either book.
Why did a brilliant scientist like Judith Ferry Baker agree to help smuggle rifles and all. That sounds like kind of below her pay grade, both morally and intellectually.
Well, first of all, she thought that everything that she was doing was part of the patriotic mission to get rid of Castro and communism. Okay, she was also doing it to impress her boyfriend. And she, thirdly, has terrible judgment, and she was 20 years old at the time.
So in other words, her scientific brilliance did not parlay into real moral sophistication or political sophistication.
She is a person who has extraordinary technical intelligence and bad judgment, in my opinion, which is why she winds up making a biological weapon in the first place. I mean, the smuggling the weapons isn't the issue. The issue is they're making a biological weapon. And what happens, and this is a girl who was raised in the Catholic Church. She is staunchly religious, okay? And when she realizes that they have taken her desire to find a cure for cancer and are using it to murder people, to test the weapons, she said, I didn't sign up for this. She bolts. Now, the question is, why does this woman, who I've never seen a case where somebody had the skids greased as nicely as she did. When she got finished this project, she was a sophomore in college. She was going to skip the last 2 years of college, go straight into a medical school. All tuition would be paid. Room and board would be paid. She gets a stipend. This is her reward for doing this thing. Today, if she had not complained to Ochsner about killing this guy, she'd be running the National Cancer Institute today. She goes back to Florida and just drops all science. Majors in art and anthropology.
What a tragedy.
It is.
And Robert Morrow, Austin, Texas here. I blame Judith, but I want to know why you do. What were the things that clinched your story for her, that she's legitimate, she was there, she was the mistress of Lee Harvey Oswald, summer 1963, you know, the cancer prodigy, and made a prodigy of Dr. Alton Ochsner?
Well, the question is, why does Judith make sense to me as a legit witness?
Yep.
Okay. And first of all, when I heard that she had worked at the Riley Coffee Company, remember, I'm the guy that found Guy Bannister's files at Inca. Okay? I know about Riley. I know about Ochsner. Okay? I know about New Orleans society and how they're hooked together in the anti-commie thing. Okay? So when I hear that she's working at Riley with Lee Oswald, bam, my antenna go up. All right? I say, you know, I'd really like to see a W-2 report on that. Okay? And for years they kind of said, well, it's over here or over there, and they're holding it secret for some big explosion like 60 Minutes or something. And they finally showed it to me. I said, okay, now I have evidence that she works at the Riley Coffee Company with Lee Oswald. That's a very important point. Then I get together with her and I see the evidence that she was trained to handle cancer-causing monkey viruses. Now, I'm the guy that wrote Dr. Mary's Monkey. I'm all over cancer-causing monkey viruses. Why is someone who is trained to handle cancer-causing monkey viruses working as a secretary at the Riley Coffee Company? You know, that's why they... I mean, one of the really interesting things is she starts... How are we doing on time, guys? We all right?
We're right at noon, so we're about to break.
Okay, good. She and Lee are hired on the same day. But they're not hired by the Riley Coffee Company. They're hired by the Standard Coffee Company that Moynihan controls. Then, 1 week later, both of them, on the same day, are transferred over to the Riley Coffee Company. Why? So they don't have to go through another background check. Okay? Moynihan is running the cell inside the Riley Coffee Company. And I think the Riley family finally figures it out and gets rid of all of them. That's what I think is going on.
I've got the book, I haven't had a chance to read it yet. In an interview on YouTube, she says that Lee briefly says that he thinks someone else is using his name. Does she go more into that?
She says that both the names Lee Harvey Oswald and A.J. Heidel are project names being used by several different people, and it's all part, I mean, she didn't come out and say it, but it's all part of Operation Mongoose, because Chauncey says, I made the A.J. Heidel things, and I gave them to Lee. And he's Mongoose. Ed?
Hi, my name is Ed Tatro, and I work with Niger Turner to make the last 3 episodes of The Men Who Killed Kennedy, Part 7, 8, and 9. Part 8 is the love affair with all about Judith Baker. Looking for proof that Judith is the real thing. First of all, I've known Nigel Turner for 10 years. He's no fool. He spent weeks with her. He knows what he's talking about. This man here is brilliant. He's no fool. He knows what he's talking about. She calls me. I deal with her every day. She's overseas. There have been all kinds of threats, all kinds of attempts to undermine her credibility, her stature, and so forth. The forums that are attacking her for a reason, because she's the real deal. The woman and he's being honest. He's telling you she has flaws. She's an emotional roller coaster. She calls me her security blanket. And I almost play amateur psychologist with her, trying to calm her down when she goes off the deep end. To make a long story short, this woman is overseas. She does not have any money. She's a hero here. And if you're going to buy any books about this subject, these are 2 excellent books, contemporary books that'll teach you a lot about not only the assassination. Now, I'm the guy that focuses on the Texas connection and Lyndon Johnson, and you have to understand that Lee told her about Bobby Baker and Billy Celestes, and you're right into the Johnson thing. So even though he's focused on the New Orleans thing, he ties into the Texas connection. All of this is incredibly important, and I urge you to buy these 2 books. Help the woman out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed. John says we're out of time. I want to emphasize that I'm going to be around, and anybody is welcome to come up and ask me questions that you have, and I'll be happy to answer them on the side. This is not, I'm out of time, but I'm not out of answers. John?
So we're going to break for lunch till 2 and come back here at 2, and hopefully by then we'll have our technological issues resolved, and we've got more speakers. And since I was able to read Peter's paper, we've basically only lost 1 speaker, Bill Pepper, who we probably won't be able to retain. But we're going to try and bring Doug Valentine in at a later point, and so we're pretty much back on schedule. But we'll come back here at 2. Tell him I read some of his paper.